Good afternoon, everyone. I think this is often the most difficult slot to keep people awake. Sorry that I won't have any other skills to entertain you, but hopefully that the paper will be interesting enough. So this paper would present a case study drawn from a project we recently implemented by the UNESCO Bangkok office to demonstrate the efforts to engage the communities in the conservation of the World Heritage Sites in Thailand. The communities in this case are not only being defined in a narrow sense, consisting of people who live in or near a heritage site, but as suggested by ICROM, are also those who feel connection to or are interested in heritage, which is communities of interest, and those who work with heritage, community of practice. The historic city of Ayutthaya, founded in 1350, was the second capital of the Siamese kingdom. It flourished from the 14th to the 18th centuries, during which time it grew to be one of the world's largest and most cosmopolitan urban areas and a center of global diplomacy and commerce. Ayutthaya was strategically located on an island surrounded by 3 rivers connecting the city to the sea, the location chosen to prevent attacks by warships and other nations, as well as impacts caused by natural disasters such as flood. The World Heritage City of Ayutthaya is now an archaeological ruin characterized by the remains of Thon Prang, the thing in the middle there, and Buddhist monasteries of monumental proportions, which give an idea of the city's past size and the splendor of its architecture. The site was inscribed on the World Heritage List in 1991 under Criterion 3 for bearing witness to the period of development of the true national Thai art. Many works of art, wall paintings, sculptures, and palm leaf manuscripts which survive from the period can still be seen on site today. So because half of the historic city island now is populated by a modern day city, the other half is archaeological ruin. The issue of community involvement is very key to anything we do, not only UNESCO, but also the Office of Historic Parks, who manage the site under the Fine Arts Department of the Ministry of Culture. So UNESCO has been facilitating the roles of local communities through 2 main approaches, where local communities were involved in managing the site, particularly in responding to disasters, and the second, which I won't go into further details, to contribute to the conservation of the monuments. Mid-July 2011, severe flooding in Thailand has hit the World Heritage City, which caused some damage to the site's monuments and overall landscape. UNESCO was one of the first agencies that was called upon to provide support to the site managers to deal with the situation. In 2013 and 14, together with Asian Development Bank and UNESCO IHE, UNESCO implemented a project to support the Fine Arts Department under Thai Ministry of Culture to develop disaster risk mitigation plan and integrate the plan into the new master plan of the historic city. The project involves, to the great extent, community consultation. Local and international experts were sent to gather information from community people of their preferred flood prevention methods. The opinions were considered in line with FAD's proposed measures to find a compromising outcome for both the local people and the central authority. UNESCO is still working today with FAD on other challenges facing by the site. During the year of 2012, FAD carried out an extensive restoration work targeting over 100 monuments inside the property and its surrounding area. An advisory mission carried out by ICOMOS in 2014 reviews the impacts of the 2011 floods and the conservation measures taking place afterward, and found that the extensive post-flood interventions at the property lack quality craftsmanship and documentation. A number of recommendations were therefore made as part of the World Heritage Committee Decision 39-COM to improve the conservation methods and approaches, which included the emphasis on better use of traditional materials and skills. Therefore, a project was designed to address some of these issues. You could see six activities were proposed under the project: the situation analysis on livelihood and professional needs of craft people and masons, who mostly are local people living in the villages around the site; a scientific study on suitable material for brick monument conservation; international symposium for heritage conservation experts; community center consultation; development of two curricula; and the pilot training for conservation masons. And to mention that this project received support from one of the private sector company in Thailand, which is like really one of the ways that we are trying to reach out to a wider group of stakeholders. So on the situation analysis, to have a better understanding on the background and skills of the people who are involved in the conservation work in Ayutthaya, a team of researchers was commissioned to conduct a 4-month field mission to interview professionals, workers, and masons involved in conservation projects at historic city of Ayutthaya over the past 5 years. The interviewees revealed the larger problem of unsatisfying career paths for conservation masons in Thailand. The masons do not have much opportunities and time to develop their skills or familiarize with the heritage sites due to the contractual system that prioritizes quantity over quality. Hence, skilled workers do not see how simply being high-quality masons can reward them financially. There is clear a need to strengthen their awareness on conservation and the intangible value of their craftsmanship. There's also require, like the larger structural change also require to address the issues, and eventually this would require the establishment of the system which recognizes the value of craftsmanship and high-quality masons in conservation projects in heritage sites and reward them accordingly. The second component of the project involves a scientific study. A scientific team led by Siplakon University, working in close consultation with FID, collected samples from early, mid, and late Ayutthaya monuments in order to undertake laboratory analysis of chemical, mechanical, and physical properties of the ancient materials. The data collection process involved consulting with local Andari who used to work for FID and use historic lime and traditional techniques at the monuments. The work also included analysis of the various materials used in restoration of Ayutthaya monuments in the later period, which includes modern materials such as cement. The analysis were able to demonstrate the constituent components of ancient Ayutthaya building materials and also gave strong proof of the negative impacts of inappropriate modern materials such as cement on ancient fabric in Ayutthaya. In-kind support was provided by Siam Cement Group, another private sector company, in terms of state-of-the-art laboratory facilities and material scientists. On October 2016, a 3-day symposium was organized to exchange knowledge on conservation of brick monuments in the context of World Heritage Sites in line with international standards and World Heritage principles related to authenticity and integrity. More than 200 international and national experts have participated in the symposium. The invited speakers addressed a range of challenges in conservation, including the appropriate application of scientific conservation principles, traditional building techniques and materials in undertaking conservation of ancient sites, as well as practical ways to include local communities for sustainable heritage protection. The symposium provided recommendations to FID on how to improve the institutional and technical capacity for the better conservation of Thailand's prime World Heritage Site. Following the recommendations from the International Symposium, UNESCO Bangkok undertook a number of consultations, including field visits to Ayutthaya. Several on-site meetings were carried out to kindle strong support from local people who play an important role in the heritage town. The initiative was welcomed by local community leaders and monks who played a role in inducing positive response and cooperation to our future activity. After several field consultations, a workshop to develop curricula for monument conservation practitioners was successfully organized in May 2017 in Ayutthaya bringing together 85 conservation practitioners, both from public sector and private sector, as well as local communities. Through extensive discussion and group works, the workshop developed outline of the curricula for training conservation professional and craft people by identifying the key areas of knowledge and skills that were still lacking, as well as supporting factors that would allow the trained craft people to apply their traditional knowledge and skills effectively. This can potentially give them better employment and to make the training compulsory for all future conservation projects. The pilot training was carried out in line with the curriculum that was developed. The first part of the training tackled core knowledge on conservation principles and concepts, involving directors of FID regional offices and historic parks in central Thailand, owners of related private companies, as well as masons from both FID and private companies. The main part of the training focused on enhancing conservation understanding, ethics and skills of the masons. In total, the pilot training was attended by 104 participants, including executives from FID and private construction companies working conservation projects, foremen, technicians, and brick masons from FID and private companies, as well as facilitators, experts, as well as UNESCO and FID working committee. The training was conducted in a hands-on manner, where the trainees took part in a range of conservation interventions. The skills considered necessary for conservation mason at the pilot training included damage assessment and recording, non-intrusive cleaning of historic plasters and stuccos, injecting lime good and filling plaster cracks, fixing and replacing deteriorated bricks, bricklaying, lime mortaring, and plastering. The project has successfully trained a number of foremen, technicians, and brick masons from FID and private companies operating in Ayutthaya. The trainees were introduced to both fundamental conservation principles as well as practical skills and knowledge across the wide range of topics, from preventative conservation, cleaning and consolidating brick surfaces, structural stabilization, bricklaying, and application of lime mortar and plaster in the traditional styles and technique. The pilot training activity has resulted in a training curriculum for conservation craft people in brick monuments conservation, vocational skills and knowledge standards for conservation craft people working on brick monuments. These were developed with inputs from FID, experts in various conservation fields, the private sector, the Ministry of Education's Technical and Vocational Training Department, the Non-Formal Education Department, and the Ministry of Labor's Labor Skills Development Department. In addition, the pilot training activity has also identified and sensitized a pool of trainers who are now familiarized with the World Heritage Conservation Standards on top of their own areas of specialization. The curriculum, vocational skills and knowledge standards, and pool of trainers will be useful for future replication of the pilot training and the establishment of the sustainable long-term training and certification system. To build up on the momentum of the project, the Director General of the FID has now announced plans to establish the School of Conservation that will provide ongoing regular training for both conservation professionals as well as field-level technicians and craft people. This school can make use of the training curricula that the project has developed. The establishment of the School of Conservation will be tied to a new proposed requirement that all technicians who will work at World Heritage and other national heritage sites will have to show that they have necessary training and official certification as a quality assurance mechanism. In conclusion, there's a few points that I want to bring up. Firstly, the preparation phase took time as the project aimed to include the widest range of stakeholders. In-depth consultation took place with site management staff, allied organizations such as the Office of Traditional Arts, College in the Court under the Non-Formal Education Department of the Ministry of Education, universities offering conservation education such as Siplakon University, Ecomos Thailand, Association of Siamese Architects, Siam Cement Group, representative of private sector, especially the private construction contractors and individual experts in various areas of conservation ranging from engineering to architecture to material sciences. The consultation helped to provide a good understanding of the level of interest and commitment from the stakeholders, as well as the challenges and the views to address them. Within the context of Thailand, involving only the local communities who work as masons in the conservation projects would not be sufficient, because their work is largely influenced by many factors, including FID and the private companies contracted by FID to carry out conservation work. Thailand does not currently have any university or vocational programs producing trained conservation personnel, either in architecture or in material conservation. There are a small handful of personnel in FID who have obtained their conservation-related qualification from overseas, but the majority of the working staff do not have specific conservation training on top of their regular degrees in archaeology or architecture. The level of conservation knowledge among the private sector partners, especially at the local level, is even less desirable. Therefore, to achieve sustainable conservation outcomes, the issue of low quality of conservation work has to be addressed at the level of conservation professional, supervisors and foremen, in addition to the masons who actually work on the conservation projects. Communities, including the locals, the authorities, the community of interest and the community of practice, play a big part in generating the project's impacts. General media show strong interest and support. Through the liaison role of UNESCO, FID and local communities welcome discussions and inquiries from media positively. Academic researchers also help empowering local practitioners through activities to exchange knowledge with local brick and lime producers and masons. Temple, especially Pukao Thong Temple, function as the ideal meeting points where FID and researchers had a platform to explain and listen to local people. Such structure of relationship rarely existed in previous heritage-related activities in Ayutthaya. Understanding the challenges faced by the masons who are currently working on conservation in Ayutthaya has led to a realization of a necessity to systematically reach out to partners beyond the conscious sector who are responsible for setting up qualification benchmarking and compensation schemes for craft people, not only those who work in brick conservation, as addressed by the current project, but much beyond. This will require a longer-term intervention which involves other key ministries such as Ministry of Labor and Ministry of Education. The conservation has begun for this purpose, and we hope that in the near future, a much larger community will be formed who contribute to the conservation of cultural heritage and sustainability of local residents. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Hahn, and I think that was a beautiful segue, despite the luncheon interruption, because of the way in which you've contextualised the different communities and their roles in the project. Can I ask if there are any questions or comments? There you go.
Thank you. That was really enjoyable and illuminating. Thank you. Indeed, I think we were all switched on. Firstly, I appreciate the SDGs recognition you put at the beginning. You're completely aligned.
That's our standard PowerPoint format of the office. So
standard of
we are
UNESCO
totally
Bangkok?
on board. Yeah.
All right. Congratulations. And tied with that, in the last slide, this partnership with actors beyond the heritage sector, I think that is exemplary. I don't think we do enough of it, so that is really something to take as a model. And my question is the certification that you started to set up. Do you see any financially measured outputs, any progress in the economic situation of the craftsmen as yet, or is it too early?
I think this is still a bit early, but we have begun. I think this is going to require a few more years of intervention, especially because now we are working with people beyond the culture sector who now consider craft people, the craft work on monuments conservation as construction manual labor. That's how much they get paid these days. So until you get a different compensation system, we had to introduce this certification system which is officially recognized by the Ministry of Education. Before that being brought to the Ministry of Labor, who set these different schemes of payment. So I must admit that this is still a long way to go. But the recent meeting that we have organized in our office, it was quite well attended by these other ministries. So it shows that they recognize the problem, they acknowledge that it's something that has to be fixed. But again, I mean, when you work with the big bureaucracy, it takes time. So we now trying to work step by step toward this goal.
Could I just ask one little follow-up question? Do you think that tourism being a big sector in Thailand has anything to do with the other ministries being more interested? Tourism is a very big business in Thailand. There is the special ministry that is in charge of tourism itself. I don't think that they really see the clear interconnection between good craftsmanship in the World Heritage Sites and tourism to be so linked, because to be honest, many tourists who come, they have no clue whether it's done by cement or it's done by very, very detailed mortar and lime that take you like five times as long. So I think there is still kind of need to be even more awareness raising within the tourism sector itself for this goal to really reach out to that side.
Please, Cassie.
So I was wondering, it sounds like you've built a really nice framework of a program then that potentially could be transported to other sites and other crafts. And I was just wondering if you could reflect a little bit on how ready you think that program is to be taken on or to be transferred to other sites now.
I think there are some of the stuff that is readily to be transferred. For example, the curriculum for conservation professionals and masons that we develop with quite a wide range of partners is ready. So it can easily be used in other sites. Unfortunately, it's all in Thai now, so we are trying now to translate that into different Southeast Asian languages. And see whether they can be used in other sites in Southeast Asia and hopefully later beyond. And like the news for the FID to organize a conservation school, which is also something very promising. But then, like I respond to the first question, to really put into a system that really reward and recognize the skills and reward them accordingly, that is still a bit of a longer way to go. We started this project around mid-2016, so it is still a relatively short time to really achieve some of the longer goal outcome. But we are still working on that. Yeah.
Thank you, Hahn. I mean, listening to that, the obvious things that jump out at me right within your area of the world would be that exactly that program would surely be relevant right now at Bagan.
Yes.
And at Sambor Prakook in Cambodia. Bagan probably more urgently because of the earthquake, but both have structures and physical conservation issues related to the brickwork that are exactly the same as what you have described at Ayutthaya. So I know your office is involved at Bagan. Is there any connection, please?
We have been involved in Bagan, and especially also after the earthquake, and some of the work has been doing. One challenge that is currently facing Bagan is the extremely limited number of staffing. So there's not a whole lot of conservation work is going on right now because simply they didn't have enough people. We were still trying to. The latest thing that we try to set up in Bagan is something similar to Angkor, the advisory committee, coordination committee and advisory committee, because you start seeing bilateral projects coming in. We recently support to develop one of the conservation plan for one of the monuments in Bagan, Ananda Okchong, and was also hoping to use that as a sample for the Bagan people, the people who work on Bagan to use. And I think, yeah, you are absolutely right. I think the next step would be try to start working at the more grassroots level, working with the masons and then the foremen and then the heritage people who supervise this conservation project. And we, unfortunately, our funding for the project comes to an end, but Bagan, Myanmar government actually received a huge fund from the private sector from the residents within the country after the earthquake. So it's they will start actually working on the conservation of Ananda Okchong after the conservation plan is complete. So we hope to come in to provide some technical support, but not, and then with the financial support from its own government.
Yes, could I perhaps just extend the questioning on Bagan? I mean, I think in somewhere like Ayutthaya, local communities are used to being consulted. I mean, perhaps at different levels of consultation and engagement and empowerment, but whereas my observation based on the very shallow perspective of one visit is, in fact, being consulted is not something that Burmese people are very used to. Mm-hmm. And so how would you care to comment on how you might actually instigate a community-centred consultative process related to crafts capacity building in a community that has undergone 4 decades of absolutely not being consulted about anything?
Wow, but I think I was in a couple of meetings that organized by the Minister of Culture. Communities, we always insist, this is as part of the process of preparing the nomination for Bagan. And we always insisted that communities are being invited, and you would not believe the ways that they bring up issues. That was very, very vocal, and yeah, it's not, they don't sit quietly in the back of the room. They were like, and then they came up to me and they were happy that things like that happen. So we continue with that with a few consultations specifically with the communities, but UNESCO didn't convene that. We suggested that the Ministry of Culture, together with the regional ministry, is under the Mandalay region. So the two main counterparts convened the meeting. We were there on the background to provide any responses related to the World Heritage and those things that the local authorities might not have knowledge on. But then the local ministries were fully in charge, and it was very, very good exchange, and we understand a lot better about their needs. Then they were worried of being kicked out of the site after the World Heritage became the World Heritage, and then I mean, yeah, they raised many of their concerns. So I don't think that when the channels are there, I don't think that they would be shy to stay away from voicing their opinions. Yeah,
that's very reassuring, Michael.
Just really to pick up on, there were so rich ideas and proposals, I think, which we're going to have to pick up for recommendations. And one of the things which I'd like to sort of flag was the issue of local academia being able to support capacity building. That was something which was put on, and I think that obviously we're going to pick up a lot of these ideas into the recommendations, but I think this is probably very, very critical.
I'm relying on you to be gathering these ready to pull them out on Thursday. Are there any further comments or questions of Hahn, please, before we move to the next presentation? Or perhaps some more grateful thanks for a really engaging presentation.
Thank you.